All right, guys, on the line with me today is Tim Yeaman. Now, Tim is actually a member of the Syndicate, and he submitted 3 tracks for the rock orchestral licensing opportunity that I had for January, and then it bled into February. And he had 2 tracks actually get selected for that. So first of all, Tim, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So you had 2 songs. One was, you had original titles, but we went with new titles. One was Seconds to Blow, which was actually one of my favorite tracks on the entire album, actually. And The Red Wire. And so what I basically want to do in this interview is just sort of get a behind the scenes look at how you compose, because as a composer myself, I have a certain way that I approach songwriting, and it actually varies depending on what kind of genre that I'm approaching. And so this is obviously in the rock metal with some orchestral elements. So this is a very particular style of genre, very particular sound that we were going for with this licensing opportunity. And I always loved like going into other producers' studios and kind of just being a fly on the wall and finding out exactly how did this guy do this, and how did he approach this process, how is he getting that sound, what samples is he using, etc. Every time in my career that I've been able to do that, I walk away much more a stronger producer, because now I have somebody else's entire approach to something now in my back pocket, and I can go to that approach if I need to. So that's essentially what I want you to walk us through. I know these were all kind of similar in sound, but what was your general approach? Did you start with a particular instrument, a particular sound? And overall, how do you go forward when you start making these kind of tracks?
Okay. Well, I'll be the first to say rock's not my it's not my normal genre by any means. So I'm more of an orchestral type person, but I like some of the trailer type music. So for me, since guitar, I don't play guitar, I play piano. Guitar is my weakness. So probably in these particular songs, I felt like I needed to focus on getting good sounding guitar loops, because I can't play obviously the guitar. So I started with on those songs I used it's a VST, but it's really just, you play it with the keyboard, but it's actually just loops that are timed. The tempo syncs to your DAW, whatever your tempo is. But I used a thing called Epic Guitars from 8DO. It's pretty good. Yeah, I like that. So, for me, it's a matter of, I started with that, and I tried to see, okay, how many different interesting loops I can find that go together, because you don't obviously want to repeat the whole thing, the entire song. So I spent probably a good hour or 2 just going through all the different presets and saying, okay, I could use this one off of this one. And, the way they work, they've got them stored by tempo. There's 140 BPM, 120, all that. So I went through all the libraries, even though they weren't all the same BPM, and tried to see which ones I thought would work together so they can make it interesting. So, that's pretty much what I did. And I also couple that with the drums, because this particular genre, I think the drums really drive, it kind of sets the tone. So, probably even on the first one I did, I think you called it the Red Wire one. I think I may have done the drums first with that. And I used, in fact, a good tip I give to everybody is, the VST companies run huge sales during Black Friday. So I usually, I'm not saying that's the only time you should buy them, but, they'll be 40-50% off a lot of times during Black Friday. So this so happens that Damage, which is a heaviosity, I'm not sure if it's how you say it, makes Damage. And
it's I think that's how you pronounce it, yeah.
Very cool drum sample loops. They're loops, you can't, obviously you can't split them out in individual components, which is a minus to it, but they really sound good. So the first song, I did start with that, and I kind of laid that and worked with the drums parallel. The guitars parallel to find ones that would fit. And on that second song, the Seconds to Blow, I do think I started with the guitar riffs and went through all that, and then kind of found some drums to match it from that.
Awesome, man. Now, you said you're primarily an orchestral composer, and your strings sounded definitely like you knew what you were doing here. So Can you talk about some of the libraries you're using? One issue that I find, especially when I'm composing strings and when I get them from my students, is a lot of times they sound like they were played on a keyboard. So they sound flat. There's not a lot of life to them. There's not a lot of dynamics. And so can you talk a little bit about how you were able to achieve a very lifelike and cinematic feel to your, especially your, I think it was your staccato strings. I think it was in the Red Wire. I believe it was in that one that I liked. There were some really awesome staccato strings going on. So how did you do that? What do you use?
Okay. Well, again, 8DO is one of my favorite, VST creators, and they have it's called Adagio, their string library. It's very, very good. I mean, it's also can be overwhelming because there's so many articulations. There may be 30, 40, 50 articulations for each instrument, but when I do strings, most of the time I actually build it all five parts. So I have the cello, the violins 1 and violins 2, sitting in the stereo field, the viola, the cello, and the bass. And then, so I use Cubase, which has, one of the things I like about Cubase is it has expression maps. So like my cello or violin track, I just have one track, but I have all 30 or 40 expressions mapped inside of that, so I can just hit like a low C0 or switch it to staccato or pizzicato or all the different kinds of articulations, so I can create a huge amount of variation, and I probably, usually when I record it, I'll just record it with one, but then I'll go back through and listen to them individually and say, well, if I change this one to a spiccato versus a staccato, all the different ones, it gives a little more emphasis, it sounds a bit more realistic. So I use that, and I also use a plugin called Virtual Soundstage, which is kind of an orchestral thing, but its purpose is to, orchestral instruments aren't right in your face. They're kind of spread out on the stage. So that plugin is kind of a way of placing your instruments in a field. It kind of does some algorithm thing that kind of places them like an orchestra is, and you can take it and draw on it and kind of move them back and forth. So that kind of gives you the stereo image of our orchestra as well. And then, I have 2 or 3 string libraries. I also have the East-West Hollywood Strings Diamond, which is also another pretty good one. It runs on the play. It doesn't run contact. They kind of have their own plug-in made to run it. So it takes a lot of processing power to do it, but it's also a pretty good one as well.
Okay, now I have a question for you. So when I'm composing strings, because I cannot play really keyboard to save my life, I'm not a keyboard player, I typically have to do like one line at a time. So if I have staccato strings, a lot of times I'll go through and I'll make the bass line first, and then I'll find something, maybe an octave higher, to do something in the mid-range to kind of complement that, counterpart that, and maybe I'll do some high violins or something and really space it out. So I actually have to go through one section at a time. Are you that kind of a composer, or are you able to do this all at one time, or how do you do it?
Oh, no, I do it one at a time. I kind of, I may start out on the piano, that's, and until I kind of find what I'm looking for. But that's not necessarily true too. And like if you're trying to do like a ostinato type thing, like is in the trailers and the rock stuff, I may actually use the string itself because it kind of more reflective of what it would sound like. But so I will layer those too as well. I mean, I don't just use the 1 or 2. So sometimes all of the different libraries are stronger in some points than others. So it might be, some of those actually are 2 or 3 different ones layered together to get it. So like the seconds to below, it's got that string part at the very front. It's kind of a smooth part, and then you suggested I overlay a synth on top of that, which is a good idea and sounded good. But it's 2 or 3. It's the Hollywood Strings and the Adagio, and I forgot there's 2 or 3 8DIO strings, and I blended all those together to make that. So
gotcha. So you got to combine quite a few different things.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I probably would guess that this was never something that came like your first time at this. You were probably terrible at it, I'm guessing, and it just took going at it over and over and over again and finding the right sounds, and then really getting to know each particular plugin until you know exactly what the limitations of that plugin are. Imagine, because here we are, it's Saturday. I mean, 1:10 my time, Pacific time. And we're both in our studios, and you're working and I'm working, and like you obviously have to just keep working and spend your time doing this. So I also want people to probably maybe you can talk a little bit about how, like, if there were any sort of points where you were frustrated when you first started trying to learn how to compose with strings, especially VST strings on your keyboard through the computer. Maybe talk a little about that process of getting better, because we all suck at something in the beginning and then we get better as we keep working at it.
Yeah, well, I still probably suck at a lot of things.
Well, hey, you made the album, so you're doing something right. All right. So for whatever it's worth, my judgment said you're on the album. So yeah.
Oh, I appreciate it. But I do get frustrated. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not the fastest person at doing it. So I did probably spend, of course, I have a very full-time job that I work during the day, and I get to do this at night on the weekends. But I did spend a good part of 2 weeks banging on Seconds to Blow, and a little bit it was. I kind of modeled it after very, very loosely pattern-wise, like that song you gave us for the mix down, only because of the way it kind of built up and had some breaks. Other than that, it's probably not very close to it. So I kind of used it and was trying to force myself to do something like that. But it took me quite a bit of time to do that one. I'd already done 3 or 4 and some other music similar to that in the past, so I wasn't burned out, but not as fresh with the ideas,
Now, you were using, like you were saying, you were using the reference track that I had provided, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how did you use that? Did you actually put it into your session, or did you just have it like in your Finder, or what did you do?
I put it in my session. It was more or less, I mapped out kind of the sections. It wasn't so much instrumentation as, it kind of built over this period of time. It took this long, as about this beats per minute. Kind of vaguely modeled it. I mean, you probably listen to it and not see it's not really that close to it in the end, but it's just a loose sketch. It does help me a lot personally to know where I'm going. Like if I just sit down and want to write a song, it's harder for me than if I have a clear objective, right? So that's so I don't know if I really answered your original question about the strings and how to compose those.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And yeah, but I think even more, like, because this is a really crucial thing that I'm trying to get across to everybody, especially people who are maybe in the beginning phases of their production career, using, because it was something that for me, I mean, I probably spent the first 4 years of my career not using reference tracks, and that was one of those big mistakes I made, and that's why my music didn't improve as fast as it could have, is because I didn't think like, hey, there's other professional composers out there that have music that sounds awesome. And what I was realizing is that my tracks had like 1,000 instruments in them, but they didn't sound any bigger. And I heard somebody's track that had maybe 6 parts in it, and it sounded huge. It was massive. So it started making me, it just completely reworked and reframed my whole perspective on producing, that you don't need to have a million different things to make your track sound awesome. You need to have really well-written parts, and they need to be well mixed and well placed, and panned properly, and things need to be coming out of the speakers. You need to use proper mixing and EQing and all that kind of stuff. But really, like, proper composing is the only way to get your tracks to sound huge. And using those reference tracks, what for me early on in my career, I wish I had, but maybe 4 years into it, I started throwing reference tracks into my actual sessions, and sort of just like you were saying, you were kind of mimicked, not obviously note for note or even the same key or tempo. Obviously, we're not ripping off anybody else's songs, but it's almost like we need to be using some, like you said, some sort of a compass or a guide for what the hell are we doing with this song? Like, what's the intensity? What should it be? How loud should you be hitting? What's the structure of a general track? And especially if you're kind of newer to producing, or you're kind of still getting your chops together, it's like the cheat sheet of all cheat sheets. It's like, here's what gets placed. I mean, you can literally go to these music libraries websites and see what music they have, and just either, if you can grab it somehow, some of them let you download it, just unauthorized. You can take a sample at MP3. But if they don't, like, go to YouTube. Most of these libraries have channels or places where you can get some of their music elsewhere, or just go find an artist that has a sound that you really love and use that track, and put that in your session and do whatever you need to do to get that track so you could hear it and compare it, A/B it. And that's what I found is the only way to make sure that you're on the right track. Otherwise, you're right, you'll bounce it. And what we do you ever do this? I used to do this all the time, is we'll make excuses for our own mixes. We'll be like, oh, that sounds great, that sounds awesome, and you'll come back like a day later, you're like, that is horrible, what was I thinking with that thing? And having reference tracks will ensure you don't run into that, because you can literally just go, here's my track, here's the reference track. Whoa, I'm way off base here. My low end is lost. I can't hear anything in the low end, or this thing isn't hitting at all, or it's really muddy, or whatever it is. Like, you'll be able to see instantly, like, no excuses, no, whatever disclaimers, like, hey, just give me a break on this track. All right, I'm doing my best. Like there is no such thing as that. You have to just be honest with yourself. So anyway, sorry, it's more about you, not about me. But
Oh, that's fine. No, I would add to that. I've got my studio monitors, and I also have a cheap $50 pair of speakers on my desk, and then I have to take it down, listen to it in my car. I have to go take it to stereo. I mean, and if I just do it in here, I still mess it up.
Yeah.
All the other ones, I'm just not that good at mixing. I struggle with that. But anyway.
It's good to know where your weaknesses are, though, because now you know where you actually should be. But again, like if you know, let's say on a reference track, depending on what your room's like and your speaker setup, whatever, really get used to listening to really well mixed and produced tracks, and you'll know this is what a really well mixed and produced track sounds like in these speakers in this room when I'm sitting right here in front of them, right? And when you start getting a real almost second nature feel for that it's almost subconscious, you know what a good mix sounds like, it'll seep into your production. I guarantee it will, because you'll know now, well, I remember that track, there was a lot of low mid warmth in their mix. My track, I don't have that low mid warmth. I'm like losing that, or something's not punching through, so maybe I need to go back to the drawing board. So really having those reference tracks and listening to those things over and over in your studio is the best way to just put it. It's almost like in your muscle memory, like it's just going to be in your ears, and you're going to know when you hear a track, you'll go, that's missing all of this or that, and you'll know exactly what you need to go back to. It was so fun when I was mixing your song and mixing everybody else's song. That's exactly what started happening to me, is that I would go listen to some reference tracks. I mean, I still use reference tracks. I've been in this industry for a while. I still go to I want our songs to sound as good, as the professionals out there that are composing in this lane. So I'm going to go find the best sounding tracks that I can. And that Blue Stolly artist, I don't know if you remember that. That was one that I provided as a reference track. He has an amazing sound. It's not even necessarily rock orchestral, but he just has a really awesome, warm, rich, hard-hitting sound. And I wanted to at least get ours close, very close if you possibly could, to his level of production and sound and mixing. So literally in every single one of the bounce tracks or the bounce folders for all of your sessions, I had your original mix. That's why I asked you for your original mix. I had my revised mix and mastered version, and then I had a Blue Stolly track. And so I literally would go back between all three. I'd be like, okay, what did he originally do? Okay, what is mine doing? Okay, definitely I'm heading in the right direction. And then I'd listen to the Blue Stolly one and go, not quite there yet, though, right? So I'd start with the original one, go to the mixed one, and then go like, okay, where am I still missing? There's still some low end that I need to put in there, or maybe I need to widen the stereo image out a little bit. Something would pop out, and it would be immediately like, it's like, remember those pictures when we were kids? It was like, what's missing from this picture, or what's wrong in this picture? That's all this is. It's just, this is the perfect picture, right? This reference track. What's missing in mine? And then once you have those back and forth, it's just... it's so much easier to go directly to the problem, as opposed to if you've been in the situation where no matter what you do, the mix doesn't get any better, and you just keep touching things and adjusting things, and you can spend hours, days on a mix, and it just ends up getting worse than it was in the beginning.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so that's just death, and you get stuck in this producer hell, mixing hell, and it's no fun. So, anyways, man, I'm gonna stop ranting and raving here. But I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, and I know that all the other members are gonna appreciate it in terms of how you approach this and take some of your recommendations for samples and plugins and what you're doing. And I guess you would, if you had any parting words for somebody who's either getting started in producing, or maybe they're already starting to produce and they want to do something more with rock orchestral stuff. Any parting words you would give for them? Well,
to me, this is one thing that for me, orchestra-wise, it's really hard to sound like an orchestra, because that's a real orchestra has got a very beautiful, unique sound. So even though you can write for a particular range in the instrument, if it sounds fake, I won't touch it. So I typically don't go really high violin parts. You can, but to me, they just sound really fake, and it just kind of accentuates the fact that it's fake. So I will. Even, to me, even if I have this great melody in my own mind that needs to be up here, if it sounds fake, I won't do it. So to me, I try, especially when you're limited to VSTs, don't let the limitations of the VST run your song, I guess. Try to use its strengths to make it sound good. So.
Very wise words, man. Tim Yeaman, dude, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And you guys will hear probably more of this album as I finish it up, and I'll be sending it out to all the members of the Syndicate, so you guys will be able to hear what your mixes sound like now that I've mixed and mastered them. and some awesome opportunities are on the way. So we're going to do some great things. So thank you, Tim. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.